This week, we are launching a brand new series, actually a series that will take us all the way through Christmas Eve. And it's called Advent. And when we talk Advent, some of us actually have some baggage with that word. Actually, for some of us, it sounds like a word from like a different language. Some of us have like other church experiences or past church experiences where Advent, that word sort of like emerges, and it's like I have a memory of that. Some of us, it's the Advent calendar that we think of, right? This 25-day countdown to Christmas and the experiences associated with all of that. Actually, some of my early Christmas memories have to do with an Advent calendar. It did not have these cool scratch-off things. It had glitter on it. And so when you would open the little door to see what little picture or little Bible verse or whatever was coming up, you would get glitter all over yourself. And that was like how you remember Advent throughout the week, I think. But I remember doing this with my brothers, and we would like decide who was the one who got to be the one to open the little Advent calendar door each day. And so you guys will get to sort that out as you work through the Advent calendar this year. But really beautiful Christmas memories. Christmas for our family actually is something we really love. If you follow my wife on social media at all or connected with her on social media, she tends to post about once a year, and that is the 100-day mark to Christmas. She's like, just so you know, I'm going to do my responsibility here and let everyone know there's 100 days until Christmas. And they're like, really easy account to follow. You're not going to get overwhelmed by content from Julie, but she's just like, hey, just so you know, 100 days till Christmas, and we love Christmas. This year had a really beautiful moment just a couple of days ago. Actually, my parents, we did a FaceTime call with them, and we celebrated as my dad went to the Christmas tree. My mom's like holding the phone, dad's there, and like flips the switch where the Christmas tree goes from just white lights to like Christmas colored lights. And doesn't sound like a huge deal, except that this was the Christmas when my dad was diagnosed with cancer that we never expected that he would get to. And so last year when we set up the Christmas tree, Dad decided to keep the tree up year round. And then this year we flipped the switch to colors, and it was just beautiful, right? So you talk about like Christmas. It's a big deal. There's a lot of feelings. I didn't know I was going to feel what I'm feeling right now as we're talking through this, but what a beautiful thing. Counting down the days until Christmas. That's part of Advent. This series actually is focused on the rest of what Advent is, because it's a series about something that we're not good at. And actually, I would say not only are we not good at it, we're actually getting worse at it the further we go. Like it's not something that we learn over time. As human beings, we are getting worse and worse and worse at this. Waiting. What we're really good at. Actually, we've replaced being good at waiting to getting better and better and better at distracting ourselves. Have you noticed if you're ever in a situation where someone needs to wait in some situation, whether it's a line that has formed or a waiting room to come into some place, it's like as soon as waiting begins, scrolling begins, right? It's like clockwork. It's like, oh, I have some time to kill. I should distract myself. I don't wait. I scroll, right? This is how we operate. Or we have gotten really good at ignoring the tension that we feel between the not yet and the what will be times in our lives. Some of us actually, what we've gotten really good at, I've actually talked to some of you about this as we've walked through some things together, you've gotten good at like hunkering down and getting through hard seasons. Yeah, I just have to get through today and get through the next day. And it's like we're not like waiting, but we're getting through. Which brings us to a word that we're going to find woven throughout the rest of this series. It's anticipation. Anticipating. Learning to savor the not yet moments because we're looking toward arrival. Right, which actually will be the theme of our Christmas Eve services this year. The arrival, to recognize that the promise that God made, he has kept, and Jesus has arrived. We're going to celebrate arrival, looking towards this, anticipating this world-changing arrival that we're going to celebrate on Christmas Eve. But this series, as we go through it as a church family, it's going to be an opportunity for us to listen to those who have waited well before us. Like, not just for like a couple decades, like for centuries. We are going to mine the experiences of people who have followed after Jesus, who have been the people of God, who have learned to wait and to wait well. We're going to pay attention to our spiritual ancestors who have practiced anticipation. And we're going to listen to their stories and listen to the words that they have to say, and we're going to ask questions like, well, what were they waiting for? And what did they do while they waited? And so this morning, we're going to lay a foundation for the rest of this series. And we're going to start with what, as followers of Jesus, we wait differently because we have hope. We wait differently because we have hope. So regardless of our present circumstances, whether they're good or they're bad, we are people who have been given a promise. It's really easy for us to look and say, so this is what life is like right now, whether that's good or whether that's bad. And we start to think this is all there is. Right? So like if it's good, let's just figure out how to hold on to what's good. And if it's rough, then it's like we just have to get through. But the reality is like it's never going to get any better. It just kind of is what it is. But in Jesus, we have something different. We have hope. And so this, whatever this is for us, is not the whole story, whether we're in good times or we're in hard times. The problem is, if we never stop and think about it, if we never stop and pay attention to it, what we end up thinking is that this is all there is, that what's happening right now is all that there is. We're just going to keep focusing on right now. And so I hope, right, we have lots of thoughts about Christmas and about when we should start thinking about Christmas and all those kinds of things, but I hope you think about Christmas, about God's promise making and God's promise keeping a lot. Actually, in preparation for this series, I've been praying that we, me and you, will have a lot of moments where we find ourselves preoccupied with thoughts of Christmas. Find our thoughts wandering toward it, find ourselves daydreaming about it. Like, can you imagine how beautiful this would be? Like, just like picture this conversation. Here we've kind of like drifted off in thought. And someone says, so what is it you're thinking about? I'm thinking about Christmas. About how God actually broke through whatever that line is that separates here from eternity. How he promised to make the things that humanity broke whole again. How he sent his son. I can't even fathom, right, how this happened, how God, like this, like sometimes we think of God just as but sent his son like in bodily form into this world to die for us. To make things right for us. Thinking about how he promised to come back and to restore all things to himself. And so I know that things are broken all around me. But I just can't stop thinking about how God will keep his promise again. Can you imagine? Being preoccupied with thoughts like that. Can you imagine thinking thoughts like that? Can you imagine just processing life? And it's like, I'm just so overcome and overwhelmed and so distracted by what God did as he has made promises and kept promises and engaged with humanity in ways that we never deserve for him to engage with us. How he has made wild promises and kept them over and over and over again. And now we are living as a people of promise, waiting for him to come back and to restore all things to himself. Just can't stop thinking about it. I'm just preoccupied with what Christmas means. And so as we listen to those who have gone before us, we're not just remembering when people waited. We're recognizing that we are waiting too. And we're remembering that there's hope. And so as I've prepared for this hope message, there's been 3 questions that have sort of just been weaving their way in and out of the conversations I've been having, the thoughts that I've been having, the conversations I'm having with God, the time I'm spending in Scripture, listening to what God has for us. And it starts with a very simple hope question. Can things really get better? I scroll too. I hear conversations too. I participate in conversations too. I know how things are. Can things really get better? This is the foundational hope question. And the follow-up question would be, well, if so, then what does better look like? Or what does it actually look like? What is it that we're actually hoping for? What is it that we're waiting for? What does it look like for that hope to be fulfilled? The thing is, if we have hope that's misaligned with the actual promise, it makes it really hard to see when the promise is fulfilled. Which actually brings me, this is so fun for me. This brings me to one of our family's favorite Christmas stories. So I'm going to go like deep into the Lamb family history of Christmases. And it's back to when our daughter, who's like almost 22 years old, she was little. And she had just gotten her big girl room, her own room. And this room, we were living in Indiana at this point, and in this room is like this window that was like almost floor to ceiling. Like this perfect opening in the side of her, like the wall in her room. And she looked at that, and when she went into that room and she said, this would be the perfect room to have a horse. Okay? And she's like, can you imagine? Dad, just think about it. I could like just leave the window open and that horse could just put its head through and I could pet the horse. I could feed the horse. Dad, this is like the suburbs in Indiana. This is not like horse territory here. This is not where people own horses. And she's like, just picture it, Dad. Can you imagine how cool that would be? There's this, just like, I could just have the horse and this room is perfect for a person who has a horse. And we're like, yeah. And so then Christmas comes around. And the Christmas list shows up from Emily. And there's one thing on it. A horse. And we're like, Em, like that's like not very likely that you're going to get a horse. Sure. Okay, sure. No, like you are not going to get a horse for Christmas. What else should you put on your Christmas list? Well, there's some other things, but like a horse would be really great if a horse would show up for me. And it's like, Julie and I talking to each other, we're like, she really thinks she's getting a horse. She thinks the more we talk to her, like we're trying to put her off the trail, like that we're going to really surprise her with this horse on Christmas morning. So like this goes on for like weeks. And so I finally have this daddy date with Emily. We go to Starbucks and we get some coffee. She gets a little hot chocolate and we sit across the table and I'm like, all right, kiddo, let's talk about Christmas. And she's like, yeah, let's talk about Christmas. So we are not getting you a horse. And she, sure, okay. like the more we tried to convince her, the more convinced she became. It's like, she's like, you're not gonna trick me. I'll play your game, but man, I'm looking forward to this horse. And so we literally had to have this extended conversation. Like, we will not leave this Starbucks until you realize, like, you're not getting a horse. And we have other things on the list that you get. Actually, she reminded me this morning that we ended up getting her a toy horse for Christmas that year. But it's like, there is a misalignment between promise and hope, right? It's like so when you get that Christmas present, it's not going to look like what you thought it was going to look like. You're so convinced. You're so convinced of a particular promise. When there's a misalignment between what was promised and what we're expecting, it makes it hard to see fulfillment. So what does better look like? And then what should we do between now and better? Right, question 3, when it comes to wrestling with and learning our way through hope. And these aren't new questions, right? The church, the people of God have wrestled with these questions for like as long as there has been recorded history. Like, what do we do when God has made a promise and there's time that is passing between the promise and its fulfillment? These aren't new questions. Actually, almost 3,000 years ago, it always blows my mind to think about how deep this history goes. But almost 3,000 years ago, the prophet Isaiah received a word from God for the people of God. Just to put it in perspective, it's almost like at this point, like we could almost like struggle to call them the people of God because they had messed up in so many ways, had made such willful decisions about not following what God had called them to follow. They had messed up in all kinds of ways. It's like questionable. We'll see this play out in some of what Isaiah has to say to them. Like, are you even the people of God anymore? The way that you're behaving, the way that you're acting, not because God isn't faithful, but because you have not been faithful. They had messed up in all kinds of ways. Their situation seemed to be getting worse and worse as the Persian Empire is forming and rising up around them. One commentator summarized the book of Isaiah with one question. He said, how can a sinful, corrupt people become the servants of God? Right? How can a sinful, corrupt people become the servants of God? That's a big question, right? That's a very relevant question for us. You talk like 3,000 years, all of a sudden the gap doesn't seem quite so significant anymore, does it? The same kinds of questions that we're wrestling with. How can we, with the messes that we have made, the things that we have done, and the way that we operate in life, how could we become servants of God? It's a big question, and it's one that addresses the major themes of the book of Isaiah. The first is that they have to deal with their past. They have messed up. They have not done what God has told them to do. They have done what God told them not to do. They've made a mess of their lives. It's questionable, not because of the lack of God's faithfulness, but because of the lack of their faithfulness, whether they could even be considered the people of God at this point. They have to deal with their past. And so Isaiah calls them to account, forces them to pay attention to the mistakes that they have made, the things that they have done. They have to deal with their past. But at the same time, as this word of God just emerges as Isaiah speaks it, it's also pointing to a future. And it's a picture that God is painting, this vision of what will be. And so it's like they have this messy past and this beautiful future that God has laid before them. And then there's the third piece. Who should they be in the meantime? How should they operate? What should they do? How should they approach life with what they have done and with what God will do? What kind of people ought they to be? Isaiah 2, verse 1. The word that Isaiah, the son of Amos, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. This is the second title. This is like part 2 of Isaiah as the book unfolds. We're starting in chapter 2. Chapter 1 is structured very similarly. It starts a specific word that Isaiah has received for the people of God. So chapter 2, it's not like we just jumped in the middle of nowhere. It's the start of a conversation that God is having with his people. It builds on some of what God had to say to his people in chapter 1, and then we'll continue throughout the rest of the book of Isaiah. But it sets up this significant conversation between God and his people. It reminds them that God actually is in charge. Reminds them that God is reigning in his temple, that God is over all of it. It's a restoring of their view of who God is and how God controls and how God operates in the world around them, how they should relate to him. And then it lays out the question about whether or not God's people would continue as the people of God or not. Again, not because God lacks faithfulness, but because they lacked faithfulness. A choice they would make in how they responded to God's correction, and then how they would live their lives as they walked in relationship with him. And in that question, we hear the echoes of some hope questions, like, will things get better? In this conversation, we hear questions about, like, what should we do between now and better? Here's the picture that God gives Isaiah, that then Isaiah speaks to the people of God. It says, it shall come to pass in the later days that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and shall be lifted up above the hills, all the nations shall flow to it. God gives Isaiah this picture, this vision of a mountain that's lifted above the hills. In the ancient Near East, where the people of God were at this moment in history, God's, and we'll put quotes around it, God's lived in or took refuge in the hills. And there was a hierarchy, like the higher the hill that this God took refuge in, that this more superior that God was. And so into this hierarchy of hills and which hill is taller than whatever hills, God gives a picture of a mountain. And that's God's mountain, right? Lifted above all of these other hills. This mountain is different. It's not just that it's lifted up, it's actually drawing to itself all nations. It's river language. So if we drill down on what Isaiah is saying and the words that he's choosing, it's river language, like a river flowing, but as Isaiah paints the picture that God is giving him, that it's actually like river language, but the river is working in exactly the opposite way that gravity works. The river is not flowing from the mountain, it's drawing to itself and drawing and lifting up as it's drawing. Moving in the opposite direction that rivers move, drawing to and lifting up. And can you imagine? Can you imagine the hope that this picture would have given to a people who felt powerless, who felt hopeless as nations around them grew in power? And there's fear. It's like, well, we're afraid of these other nations who are powerful. And then they see this picture, and it's like if power, as it relates to gods and nations, has to do with the heights of the hills, then this mountain, and it's like God's drawing all nations to himself. But this isn't a power picture. In the first few centuries of the church wrestled with what Isaiah was talking about. These decades and centuries immediately following Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. This passage was understood in light of Christ's arrival. Like they were in the echoes of Jesus' death and resurrection, and they look at what Isaiah has to say, and they'd say, like, lift it up, and drawing all nations to itself. Like, that's Jesus. So Augustine preached on this passage, and he talked of Christ the mountain. He preached on this message and talked about the mountain of refuge, not just that like the gods would take refuge on the mountain, but that we would find refuge on the mountain. This Jesus Christ inviting us and lifting us up and helping us find refuge. Augustine looked at what Isaiah had to say to the people of God and said, now we can picture a world with Christ at the center. Now we can picture a world where Christ is lifted up and is drawing all people to himself. Augustine pointing to the fulfillment of a promise while anticipating the fulfillment of another of God's promises. Augustine giving credible reasons for hope. Augustine pointing people to Jesus. And Isaiah continues, and many peoples shall come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Every time I come to this passage, as I've been preparing for this moment, it is this picture that Isaiah is painting as God is speaking and giving him vision, it stirs my heart in deep, deep ways. Just imagine God lifted up in a community so clearly and so credibly that the normal conversation that happens in the world around us is people saying things like, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, that we may walk in his paths. Like we could be sitting in a coffee shop together and someone at the table over us, we're not trying to listen to their conversation, but there's certain words that they pop up when we start to like hear them more clearly. And it's like these two people having a conversation, we don't know them at all. And they're like, I don't even know why I feel this way, but let's go to where we can see God lifted up clearly, where God can teach us how to walk in his ways. And we're like, this is the conversation that's happening in the world around us. Like this is a community conversation. This is the normal conversation. We go to the grocery store and like checking out at the cash register, and it's like the conversation is like, look, I just want to know what God has to say about how I should live my life. Like we can't even fathom the picture that's being painted, and yet it moves. Can you imagine God lifted up so credibly, God worshiped so clearly, God made so clear that our community, the normal conversation is spurring each other on to live our lives in the way that God created us to live our lives. Would that not be incredible? And it's a beautiful picture of God on mission, drawing people to himself. And here's the thing, we talk about power, talk about how this all relates and God in charge and all these kinds of things. This is utterly and unapologetically a religious revolution. There's no apology that's being made for this. This is Isaiah speaking what God has shown him. And he's like, this is religion. Like in his very, very best version, this is God lifted high and worshiped and recognized as the Lord of all things, and that all things are under his command. And this is worshiping God and God drawing people to himself, lives lived with God at the center. The whole world, or you talk about revolution, the whole world learning to walk in his paths. Like, this is a religious revolution. It's beautiful. I don't know if you have heard this, but the church gets accused a lot of being stuck in the past. Like that's like an old thing. like people used to. That's like old news. Like that's like old stuff. Isn't that quaint that people still think that way? And then I read this. 3,000 years ago, Isaiah speaking a word that God gave him, painting this picture that God revealed to him, this vision that he gave to him. And it's like, this is the future. And so you could accuse the church of being stuck in the past, but the reality is we are bleeding edge early adopters of the future. We are people of the future. This is what God says the world is heading to and how God is going to call and invite people to live their lives in a relationship with him. And every Sunday morning, and we gather, we worship, we lift God high, we learn to walk in his paths. And eventually, the rest of the world will catch up, but we are people of the future. He shall judge between the nations and shall decide disputes for many peoples. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Some of us have baggage when we start to talk about God as judge, start to think about what that might look like. The picture that God gives Isaiah that we get to take hold of is so beautiful and so hopeful. God as judge, not just deciding between like people who are disputing between each other, but God as judge leading to the end of disputes. God as judge, judging so righteously and so rightly and so wisely that there's actually no need for war anymore. There's no need for conflict anymore. That under God's care, people thrive. So much so that swords aren't needed and spears aren't needed. And the things that were weapons of destruction and violence become instruments of greater fruitfulness. That the weapons of war and conquest aren't needed, and so they're transformed into what's useful when things are under the care of God. And God's people, we move from thoughts of war and power to mission, from conquering to participating in God's drawing of people to himself. Living in an invitation to live on mission between now and better. Then Isaiah closes this section of the vision with this statement, O house of Jacob, come, let us walk in the light of the Lord. Walking in the light of the Lord means living as a people of hope, means learning and teaching others how to follow his ways. It's an invitation, right? This picture, this vision that's painted, and then it's so what do we do in response? And Isaiah says, here's like step one in response. Let us be a people who walk in the light of the Lord. Come, let us walk in the light of the Lord. Almost 800 years later, a man by the name of John recorded the arrival of Jesus with these words. In John 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him not anything was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And there was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light. The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood nor of the will of the flesh or of the will of men, but of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we have seen his glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. Isaiah says, come, let us walk in the light of the Lord. 800 years later, John writes, let's walk with the light of the Lord. Like we're walking in and we walk with. In Jesus, we walk with the light of the Lord. Light shining into the darkest corners of our lives. And then we as a people of the light walking and carrying that light in the darkest corners of the world. We are a people. We are a people of hope living in a world that desperately needs to see hope. Have you noticed this? Have you noticed that the world is longing for what we have through Jesus? Now, there's all sorts of ways they try and fill in the gaps between what is and what should be. Lots of thoughts about what better should look like. Lots and lots of thoughts about what we should do between now and better, right? The world is wrestling with these questions that we're wrestling with. Like, can things really get better? What does better look like? What should we do between now and better? We're not the only ones wrestling with these questions, but we wrestle with these questions with hope. And so I picture this moment that we find ourselves in. And I actually pray that you find yourselves in moments like this, where there's conversations that are happening around you, where there's conversations that because people who don't have the hope that we have are trying to make sense of the world and trying to make sense of what better looks like and what they should do between now and better. They're trying to figure it out, but it's without hope. And they're reading the news, and they're seeing what's happening in the world around them. And there's things that are happening that are frustrating, and there's conversations, and we are in these conversations, and they are moving because it's a world without the hope we have. The conversations don't lead to hope. And I pray that you find yourselves in conversations like that. And I pray that as those conversations are playing out, that there's something that's disturbed in you, that you're bothered by it, that you hear these conversations that are operating and happening without hope, and you're like someone should speak hope here. If only there was a person who had hope that could like lead this conversation and influence this conversation in a different direction. It's you. That as the people of God, a people who have been given hope through Jesus Christ, we don't just participate and let conversations drift wherever conversations go. So we're gonna take the lead where we need to take the lead, and we will bring hope into conversations that need hope. To put this into practice, a really simple approach that we could take as we go about our days, we simply to ask ourselves some questions. Maybe it's a daily question. Maybe it's a question that we ask ourselves like after every conversation that we have as the day goes on. So like, it's a conversation I have had with our staff. I did it a few weeks ago as like a Monday morning sermon with our staff and staff meeting. I said, like, there's something that's just bothering me about the way the world is, and I'm going to start this conversation with you guys. And we had a conversation within our board, our action team, about the same kinds of things as it processed. And I'm like, I feel like wherever we have a conversation right now, we need to be talking about something. And it's this thing, that in my interactions with others, do people walk away feeling like there's a credible reason to have hope? Right? In my interactions with other people, when I talk to people, when I engage in conversation with people, do they walk away feeling like there is a credible reason to have hope? Right? To say like, we have hope. Do we bring that hope into our conversations and give credible reasons for a world that desperately needs hope to have hope? Because there's a follow-up question. My interactions with others, do I point them to Jesus? Right? And as I interact with other people, do I consistently point them to Jesus? When we have conversations, do I just talk about myself, or do I talk about the hope I have in Jesus Christ? Giving credible witness to the hope that we have. In my interactions, do I bring hope? Do I point people to Jesus? To be a people of light means that we will bear light in the world around us. To be a people who walk in light, we can't help but bear light. So people of hope, you, people of hope, me, people of hope, we don't just wait around. We don't just let conversations flow however they're moving, and we're like, well, that's just too bad that they couldn't see that there's hope. As people of hope, we bring hope into our interactions with other people. We don't just participate in conversations. We're intentional in conversations. We help people find hope in Jesus. May we be a people who are so convinced of the hope that we have in Jesus that we walk out with the conviction that it is our responsibility to bring hope into the world around us. Not just wishful thinking, but Jesus Christ in our interactions with others. We have credible reasons to have hope. and that we point people to Jesus, because we are people who are invited and called to walk in the light of the Lord.